Remember when Eli Drinkwitz assured us that the SEC is an offensive lineman, trenches kind of league? Well, he was not joking, and he is walking the walk now. Let's talk about all that and how important this next season is for Missouri basketball right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and a man on vacation. Yes, I am searching for Greg Sankey down here in Florida to give him a piece of my mind. But no, seriously, coming up on the show, we got to talk about Simeon Barrow. I've had some listeners questioning if he would really be as big of a get as it would appear. Also, we got to talk about this 24-25 Missouri basketball season. How important is it for the program in general and Dennis Gates specifically? Before we get going, though, I do want to remind you this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And apologies here for the audio quality, a bit different of a shot here on YouTube, obviously, as well. I'm outside, had to get a whole new microphone set up here on vacation, the whole deal. So not your usual quality you've come to expect from John Miller and Locked On Mizzou, by golly. But you know what? We're going to push through anyway and have a lot of fun on today's program because there's a lot of good news to talk about when it comes to Missouri basketball. Just a huge weekend of visitors for Eli Drinkwitz and company. Really just a massive weekend for offensive linemen. Of course, Michael Fasusi is the big name on campus this past weekend, but plenty of other good linemen and prospects as well. Another guy from Texas that is probably Missouri has an even better shot than in Fasusi is Lamont Rogers, a four-star offensive lineman from Mesquite, Texas. Also, Andrew Babalola from Overland Parks had lots of great things to say about his visit. I think Missouri's got a really, really good shot at that highly ranked offensive lineman as well. And also Carius Kern as well, a former Arkansas commitment from the state of Arkansas. Well, he decommitted from the Razorbacks. He's very much in play for the Tigers right now. So I just gave you four pretty major names there on the offensive line. Missouri already has Jack Lang, an in-state prospect, a four-star guy on the line in the fold. So to me, if Missouri can get two of those four guys, and I'd say they're probably leading at the moment for two of those four guys, that would be an enormous victory. You get three of them, four of them, probably not realistic, all four, right? But seriously, just get half of those guys. And suddenly, this is the type of offensive line activity to me that just gives me tremendous amounts of hope that this is truly a new era for Missouri football, and not just say a blip on the radar like maybe 13 and 14 were, where Missouri came into the SEC, had tremendous success early, ultimately for a whole bunch of reasons could not sustain it. Well, Eli Drinkwitz talked when he was hired. I mean, I'm talking very first day about how the SEC is a trenches league. It's a lineman league. Well, again, he is walking the walk right now. It's really incredible what Missouri is doing. Again, to even be on somebody like Michael Fasusi, or to be presumably leading for a four-star lineman from Mesquite, Texas. I'm just telling you, as a guy who's been a Missouri football fan for basically 35, 40 years, my entire life, this type of stuff just does not happen to Missouri football. This really seems like a new era. And all you out there who are poo-pooing Missouri and just saying it's all NIL or whatever, I'm sorry, is that supposed to wound me as a Missouri fan? We're rooting for laundry here. Let's not act like we need perfect rationality at all times. As long as my team is winning, especially within the rules that have been laid out, we can argue about how stupid the rules are or lack thereof all day. But Missouri appears to be winning in the environment in which everybody else is playing. So, frankly, all the excuses and whining from other programs at this point, where Missouri, a non-blue blood program, is now starting to beat out some blue blood programs, or at least compete for them frequently for recruits. Yeah, I'm just not really interested in all that retrospective whining and crying from our opponents. And by the way, just a little bit more on this. Missouri is now back in play for Simeon Barrow, and I had multiple comments on my YouTube page that were essentially the same comment saying, oh, gee, good for you. They're back in play because of NIL. Well, let me tell you something, folks. Again, that doesn't wound me, that comment whatsoever. Let's just be clear. The Miami Hurricanes are no slouch in the NIL space either. So one thing, too, all these YouTube commenters, they just seem to think that they know a lot more about name, image, and likeness and all the payments that are happening than they really do. And yet all of their information is in conflict. So my point here is, I promise you, I keep trying to find out all the information I can on this stuff. What I ultimately discover is that really nobody knows much of anything, truly knows anything about name, image, and likeness. Although, hey, this Florida lawsuit that's coming out, that's starting to shed some light. But again, for the most part, all of this NIL talk is just that. It's just talk and pure speculation and rumor and innuendo. But specifically on Simeon Barrow, the former Michigan State transfer on the interior defensive line, a guy that originally, again, just a couple months ago, was committed to Miami. Well, he's back on the market. Again, not only are there apparently free transfers every year, apparently you can transfer whenever you want as well. So I had one of my biggest fans out there, John Berger, says, how big of a get is Simeon Barrow? He came from a Power 4 program that was middling. He had okay stats, not stellar. I mean, you can never have enough defensive line guys. And I think that last sentence is really kind of the point here, especially for Missouri after everything they lost on the interior this past season. I think it makes all the sense in the world to try to add depth. And if he's a guy that Missouri really wants, that's good enough for me, because quite frankly, there's not a lot of interior defensive linemen who are going to have massive statistics. Aaron Donald, the former St. Louis, Los Angeles Ram, he's the exception to the rule, right? Chris Jones for the Chiefs, same deal. More often than not, though, your interior defensive lineman, again, unless you're Sheldon Richardson or something, it's going to be hard to get more than 4 or 5 sacks, a bunch of TFLs. That's more for the edge rushers. So I wouldn't overanalyze the counting stats of any interior defensive lineman. And you know what, quickly here, I do want to acknowledge some bad news here on the football field for Missouri, and, well, specifically for Isaac Thompson, who is medically retiring from football. He was a pretty impressive 4-star prospect, safety out of the St. Louis area, and, well, obviously injuries derailed his career before it could even get started. And I just have a lot of sympathy for Isaac Thompson. I really do. That had to be a tough decision, because any of these kids, I promise you, any of these kids, I really don't think that's an exaggeration, who are at least a 4-star, certainly a 5-star prospect, I guarantee you every single one of them thinks they have an eventual shot at the league and to play pro football in the NFL. So obviously really disappointing for him as a young man to see his career just never get out of the starting blocks here in college. So Isaac Thompson, best wishes to all of you in whatever you're doing in the future, of course. But I'll tell you what, before we get to basketball coming up on the show, and I do want to talk about how important this season is for the Missouri program. I don't think there's any question that it's really important for Dennis Gates, but how important is it really to the actual Missouri basketball program? Let's talk about that coming up here in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about a FanDuel, because I tell you, these days it's winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And I'll tell you, I kind of liked Dallas coming into this series as an underdog against the Boston Celtics, but with news breaking this morning that Kristaps Porzingis is looking pretty good to go, I'm going to stay away from that one. I think that's just a stay away at this point. But regardless of what you think, you got to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So before we get to the big picture of Missouri basketball here and that discussion, I did think an interesting comment I wanted to share from you that I got from a man named Samuel Hunt Jr. He says, as a diehard Duke fan, I can tell everybody on here, y'all are getting an outstanding player. And that when it comes to transfer Mark Mitchell, by the way. He says, I love Mark, and it crushed me to see him leave. Yeah, his shot is so ugly, LOL, but it goes in. People are going to sag off, but Mark will make you pay. And I believe wholeheartedly he is going to be an NBA player. Be great, Mark. So obviously a classy comment there from a Duke fan and an encouraging comment from a Duke fan. If you're a Missouri guy, I got to, just from the little I've seen from Mitchell, he is a really, really impressive player. Again, with a shot that is borderline broken, I would say, just in terms of mechanics. So if he can maybe commit to that, to changing his shot a little bit this offseason, just some simple mechanical tweaks. Sure, there'll be some growing pains there, but I'm just telling you, I think it'll work out in the long run for him. I really do. But when it comes to this 24-25 season, obviously Mark Mitchell is going to have to be a really big part of it if Missouri is going to bounce back from last year's absolutely horrendous 0-19 campaign. And first of all, this is a hugely important season for Dennis Gates in his career, in my opinion, because if Missouri really disappoints next season, listen, I'll just take 0-19 off the table at this point, but let's say they finish, I don't know, 13th out of 16 teams in the SEC or something like that. Again, I'm not predicting this, but it certainly is within the realm of possibility. Well, I think if we suck again and really truly suck, there's absolutely a chance that Dennis Gates gets fired. Let's not forget the lady who hired him, DRF, Desiree Reed-Francois, well, she took her talents to Arizona. So one of her biggest backers, the woman who extended his contract after that incredibly memorable and successful first season for the Tigers, well, she's no longer here. And if you don't think that's a factor, I got news for you. It absolutely is a factor. All athletic directors have egos, and if you're not their guy per se, well, you're going to have a shorter leash, a shorter margin for error. That's for sure. So here's the thing, though. I do think that regardless of what happens next season, and obviously if Missouri sucks again next season, has to get a new coach perhaps, worst case scenarios, yeah, that's going to set the program back. But ultimately, I think Missouri's basketball program will be fine as long as the interest remains. But man, what a blow it was. And I'm going to just pause here while this helicopter gets by me for a second. All right, thanks, folks. The perils of podcasting outdoors. But anyway, what was I saying there? Yes, I was talking about Missouri basketball. So the deal here is that it was just such a blow after last season to not only not follow it up with a tournament appearance, but to go 0-19 was just unimaginably terrible. And the reason it was even worse than what it seemed like on paper to me is because after 22-23, to me, that was a truly magical basketball season that came out of nowhere. And yes, the ending left something to be desired. I get it. But the point is, it felt like to me that Missouri men's basketball was truly back and here to stay. But unfortunately, you simply cannot say that now. How patient are we as fans? How many diehards, quite frankly, are still alive? To be brutally honest, and let's pause for the helicopter again. But seriously, as more and more time goes along here, listen, I'm a 41-year-old guy, and there's lots of people who are my age who are diehard Missouri basketball fans, which makes total sense. Look at what we grew up with. People in their 40s got to see at least Doug Smith and Anthony Peeler and all those good teams. People in their later 40s, of course, remember John Sunvold and Steepo and all those great teams, the 4 Big 8 titles in a row. But since then, if you're a Missouri fan in your 20s or a teenager, something like that, what do you have to really grab onto? How old do you have to be a Missouri diehard basketball fan at this point? I mean, honestly, do people who are 20 years old, do they remember the 2012 team that lost to Norfolk State fondly, or is that just something that kind of went over their head? I don't know. I'm just really curious to see how patient Missouri basketball fans are. And frankly, if and when Missouri basketball is back again, some of our diehard fans, they're dying off, man. I hate to say it, every single year. So you got to make new ones. That's the whole point. You got to make new fans with each and every passing season. And unfortunately, Missouri has not done themselves a lot of favors in terms of fan support recently. It's frankly stunning, and a credit to Missouri's basketball fans how they came out for 22-23 and supported a really fun squad. Just hopped on the bandwagon after a couple months. Man, they saw it once SEC play started. It was basically sellout after sellout after sellout. So I think we can get back to that. We better just do it sooner rather than later. That's all I'm saying. So in my efforts last week to add some nuance and some subtlety to, I would say, Barry Odom's legacy at Missouri, I had some people push back and say, oh, that's ridiculous. Odom deserves no credit whatsoever. And in fact, he set the program back massively. But again, is that really true? Let's talk a little bit more about who and what actually set the Missouri football program back. And also, hey, it sure looks like the SEC is about to embark on some NFL-style injury reports. Got some thoughts on that as well coming up here in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And frankly, LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats throughout the day that they might not have the time nor the resources to make the proper hire. Well, LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make that process easier. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So I know nuance can be tough for people sometimes. I really do. So let me be clear about my feelings on Barry Odom. I'm not saying that Barry Odom didn't deserve to get fired. Certainly Barry Odom had his hand in him losing his job after 2019. But as to this idea that Barry Odom single-handedly set the program of Missouri football back, that's a little tough for me. I'm not saying Odom did the greatest job. Frankly, he was probably thrust into an SEC head coaching job that he wasn't ready for yet. Most people would be a lot better served being a head coach at a lower level of football than that being your first job. And frankly, being your alma mater too, that just ratchets up the pressure even more. And frankly, to me, there's two things that put the Missouri football program back quite obviously more than Barry Odom. First of all, Gary Pinkel getting cancer and being forced to retire. Well, listen, I'm not saying Gary Pinkel would have coached another decade or anything like that, but I don't think that was his ideal exit whatsoever. I don't think he was just planning to necessarily retire after 2015, especially with and top it all off with, yes, the poop swastika and get me some muscle and all that crap from the 2015 protests. I just think that, again, if it weren't for the cancer thing, Gary would have probably stuck around another season or two. I think at least we've gotten indications that, he was thinking about retiring anyway, in spite of the cancer thing. Maybe he was starting to wind down a little bit in his career anyway. But again, regardless, I just think Missouri would have had a better opportunity if those two things didn't basically happen at the exact same time, to be able to cast a much wider net than a guy who was an alma mater, a former Missouri Tiger, and a guy who'd never been a head coach before. Frankly, I think you'll see Gary Odom. There's a good chance he'll probably do better at UNLV, work his way up. Who knows? He might be a Power 5 coach again someday. But I just think, guys who are, again, true sons like Barry Odom, not saying he didn't deserve to get fired. I think he mostly got what he deserved in his time at Missouri. I'm just saying that was a really, really tough spot for him to be put in. And the idea that he's just a moron or whatever is just, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous, number one. Number two, Barry Odom did a lot of things in terms of player development and, analyzing and finding under the radar talent, put a lot of guys in the NFL who weren't exactly 4- and 5-star prospects. So he deserves some credit for that. Certainly he deserves most of the blame for what he got too. I'm just saying, hey, he's a Tiger. He's a true son. He's always going to be a Tiger. Let's maybe back off of the criticism just a little bit on Barry Odom. We're on to the Eli Drinkwitz era. By the way, just saw that ESPN released its FPI data. Now, to me, I'm more of an S&P Plus guy. I'm more of a Bill Conley guy. But, hey, FPI has its value as well. And really the point here is that, once again, the advanced statistics really like Missouri for this season. FPI has the Tigers as projected to be the 10th best team in the country with a 37% chance to make the college football playoff. Hey, that's pretty good. I'll take close to 50-50. I like those odds. A 6% chance to win the SEC, which obviously is not zero. Hey, 1 out of 20 or so, I'll take it. But honestly, it did get me thinking, though, how far of an advancement, answer me this question, how far of an would Missouri need to advance in the college football playoff that would basically be the same as winning the SEC? Now, obviously, if you win the college football playoff and finish second in the SEC, for example, yes, I'd rather have a national championship than an SEC championship. But my point is, I would love to win the SEC, and that would be just a skosh below winning a national title for me. So unless Missouri made the Final Four or something, I would rather see them actually win the Southeastern Conference. And really, as I say that, heck, I've seen Missouri make the de facto Final Four in 2013 and 2007 in football. So maybe make the title game. I don't know. Really anything short for this podcast, or the more I talk about it out loud here, I think really anything short of a national title, I'd actually rather have an SEC title than, say, a deep run in the college football playoff. Because to me, championships are what it's about. Flags fly forever. All those good cliches. And you know what? Finally, before we get out of here, I do want to talk about this injury situation here. In fact, Steve Sarkisian, the Texas coach, has some thoughts on it, on injury reports potentially coming to the Southeastern Conference. You know what his solution is to the whole thing? Fine us. In other words, fine us if we lie. Quote, that's what they do in the NFL. I'm a big believer in this. The NFL has figured out a lot of this stuff already. They've already had to live through these things that have occurred. So we don't have to recreate the wheel so much. If I try to game the system and I don't report a guy who is injured, fine us. We all like the money that we make, so that's a really simple way to get us to adhere to the rules. And you know what? I have to admit, Steve Sarkisian has a pretty good point here. If we're going to try to get injury reporting NFL style, hey, look to the NFL. They've done a lot of experiments here. There's been decades of this stuff in the NFL of injury reporting and all that good stuff. So really, I don't see this as a big problem for the SEC or anything like that, considering the amount of information and resources that conference is. It's basically NFL light. I think Steve Sarkisian makes a pretty fine point there. But again, I would be really curious to hear all of your takes. Would anything short of a national championship, would you rather have the SEC title? Because I certainly would. Or would you rather have a deep run in the college football playoff? Let me know your thoughts. Hit me up at Locked On Mizzou on X, Instagram, TikTok, the whole deal. Also, Locked On Mizzou at gmail.com. And, of course, always the YouTube comments are wide open as well. So, until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.